is somewhat transmitted to your brain. So in the brain, we have your brain secretes and releases chemicals. And these chemicals, neurochemicals, affect and help you change your emotional state. So you might be thinking, okay, well, when I feel sad and when I feel angry, what do I do? Do I just wait for it to go down? No. You apply a principle called the Law of Displacement. Think about this. If you walk into a hotel room and it's pitch black, it's dark, how do you get all that darkness to leave the space? How do you do it? You simply click and flick the light switch. Light displaces darkness. If you click the switch again, the light leaves, darkness comes back in. So you and I have to learn the principle of what we call substitution, the law of displacement, meaning how do you get rid of a thought? When you're not feeling right, when you're not feeling great, what do you do to get rid of a thought? Remember, we're talking thoughts, feelings, and actions. Whenever you notice an emotion that you have a choice. You can change it in 3 ways. You can change what you're thinking about or what you're focusing on. You can change how you feel, or you can change what you do. Now, one of the fastest ways to change your emotions is to change your physical state. We call it your physiology, meaning you have to do something. And by doing something is the fastest way to change your emotions. You can go to the opposite side. You can start with your thoughts. You choose a thought, you focus on the thought, you put the thought in your mind, you focus on that thought, you get emotionally involved with that thought, and you realize actually, suddenly, it changes how you feel. Let me give you a good example, make it more practical. You're feeling sad. You pick up the picture of your mother. Beautiful. See, you see a beautiful face. In your mind, you start to think about how beautiful she is. You start to think about how lovely she's been. You start to think about the great things she's done, perhaps the time she might have shared. What you find is by doing that, you displace the thought you had previously. The concept most people use, and the example most people use, is where they say, don't think about a red Ferrari. Whatever you do in the next few minutes, and you can play this game with me now, in the next, say, 30 seconds, whatever happens, I don't want you to think about a red Ferrari. Don't think about it, don't even see it. Now, when I made that statement, the first thing that happens is that an image flashes in your mind. An image of a Ferrari, a red Ferrari. And the reason is because when we think in pictures. You and I do not have the ability not to think. We're thinking beings. So the idea that you can still your mind and not think about anything, in my opinion, is somewhat naive. Because the way we think is in pictures. When I say mother, you don't think M-O-T-H-E-R. A picture comes to your mind. It could be your mother, it could be a mother you know, but we think in pictures. So you and I can, what we must do is learn, like I said, don't think about a red Ferrari. Whatever happens, don't think about a red Ferrari. Remember this. What if I said to you that I was walking back from the supermarket earlier on today, and I walked past a man, and he was wearing a white shirt, a beautiful white shirt. Now, can you notice what's happened in the last few seconds? The moment I mentioned white shirts and men, the picture in your mind changed. If you had a Ferrari in your mind, you moved to another thought. Why? Because we move by displacing one thought with another thought. So you can change the thoughts in your mind simply by changing the picture you put in your mind. That's one way. By changing the picture and the thoughts, and by focusing on that thought, the way you feel changes. Your emotional state changes. And if you sow a thought, you reap a feeling. If you sow a feeling, you reap an action. If you sow an action, you reap a result. So you can change your results simply by changing the thoughts. Let's go the other way around, the opposite side, which is you can take action. If you think, okay, well, I'm not feeling too well, you can do something. You can change how you use your body. And by changing how you use your body, by changing your physiology, good example, change the way you breathe. That's why most people say whenever you feel overwhelmed, whenever you feel anxious, whenever you feel fearful, whenever you feel excited, whenever you feel maybe somewhat depressed, they say breathe. you need to start taking deep breaths and breathe from your abdomen. You breathe all the way in and you breathe all the way out. So maybe you breathe, you hold your breath for a few seconds, and then you breathe out. So you see practices like yoga is very, very much centered around the breath. As a matter of fact, if you look at ancient scripture and ancient writing, it says that breath is the sign of life. The spirit goes in, the spirit goes out. So when the spirit departs the body, there's no breath. When the spirit is in the body, there's breath. So one of the things you can do is simply change your physiology, change your breathing, change the way you use your body. Now, here is what I was trying to explain. The brain has neurotransmitters, and you can stimulate an emotional state by simply choosing a few activities, actions that you can do, and very quickly it changes how you feel. Now, I don't know if you've heard of dopamine and endorphins and serotonin and oxytocin. These are chemicals that are released by the brain. And these chemicals, we call them the happy chemicals. Why? Because if you apply the principle I'm about to share with you next, what you find is it becomes really easy for you to stay focused, but also for you to have a beautiful life and a happy life. Remember this, your emotions and the quality of your emotions decides the quality of your life. Let me start with the first, dopamine. How do you secrete dopamine? Well, it's quite easy. If you understand the fact that we are goal-striving animals, for example, if you feel depressed, if you feel a lack of confidence, a lack of self-esteem, and that's the emotion, perhaps you feel, okay, my emotion, you say, okay, what? I don't feel happy, I don't feel good. Okay, number one, awareness. What is the emotion? Well, I feel down. I feel down. Okay, what is the category? Well, sad, mad, glad, and scared. Well, I feel sad. Great. Okay, what is the reaction? These questions are what you're taking yourself through. Well, how would you want to feel? What would be the positive response? Well, I'd like to feel happy. Okay, that is affecting the fact that you don't have confidence. What do? Very quickly. Dopamine can be created by your brain. You don't have to rely on any external stimuli. I say to people, if you feel depressed, it's simply because, number one, you either have unfulfilled expectations or you have perhaps too huge expectations about life, or you've lost your focus. What do? If you want to create dopamine, if you want dopamine to be released, it's quite simple. You set a goal. And that's the reason why we encourage, and I always encourage people, I say, listen, you've got to wake up every day with a goal in mind. Why? Because when you have a vision, something you're pursuing, you're excited. The great writer says that without vision, the people perish. The people lose self-discipline. They lose focus. They lose hope. They lose inspiration. Goals and the achievement of a goal, actually the pursuit of a goal and the achievement of a goal releases dopamine. And that's the reason why if you start the day and you say, do you know what, I'm going to write down 10 things I'm going to do today. And as you go through the day, you tick them off, tick, tick, tick. What you find is that you're overwhelmed with excitement. Why? Because your brain is releasing dopamine, and dopamine keeps you happy. That's the reason why, if you notice, people who have a sense of direction in life, there's a part of their life that is usually what I would say quite organized. And most of the time you find that some of them, not all of them, some of them, they're really living. They're not existing, they're living. Why? Because you set a goal, you achieve the goal, your brain releases dopamine. It keeps you happy. Number two, endorphins. Endorphins. How do you release endorphins? Well, it's quite easy. Quite easy. How? Go for a run. We call endorphins the chemical that is released when you actually go for a run and you hit the second wind. And you find actually that you get engaged in an activity, and by doing that, what you find is your body just floods you with endorphins. It's a happy drug. It's a happy drug. So I'd like you to take some time whenever you have, say 10, 15 minutes, and just do some research and say, Dopamine, endorphins. How do I get my brain to release them? Because you see, these are healthy, natural chemicals. You don't have to try to watch a comedy, although I think it's very important. But you don't have to indulge in anything that is negative for your body, but it might provide you with a short-term, I say, benefit. You can be very selective, and you should be. The reason is because whatever you do, you always want to choose goals and do things that increase your level of self-esteem, improve your identity of self. And the best way to do this is to stick to things that are good for you, good for other people, things that follow the golden rule of life, and more importantly, in the long run, makes you a better person. So dopamine, endorphins, they're natural chemicals you can release. Now, let's talk about the other two very quickly. Serotonin, very important chemical. Whenever you feel lonely, whenever you feel a lack of significance, maybe you feel unhappy, it's an indication that you have very low serotonin in your body. Because serotonin is linked to significance. In other words, a sense of importance. How do you do this? You notice that people who feel lonely, people who feel depressed, are focusing inwards. They're selfish. Now, I'm not saying that in the broad scheme of things. I'm using the word selfish, simply meaning the direction of your focus is inwards. It's all about me. It's all about what I have lost, what I'm not getting, what I deserve but I don't have. If you turn your focus and focus on other people and say, do you know what? I want to make that person happy. What can I do to make that person feel important? What can I do to help? What you notice is that you change your focus, and by trying to help other people, you start applying a principle of life called the law of sowing and reaping. It says, give, and it will be given back to you in good measures, pressed down, shaking together, and running over. Here's the beauty about some of the universal laws of life, and this particular law, meaning the law of sowing and reaping. When you sow, you never get back what you sow. It's a beautiful law of life. You always get, if you do it well, much more. So whenever you give, whenever you try to do something for someone with a positive attitude to create happiness for them, what you find is actually by creating the experience of happiness for them, you find that you find happiness in yourself. And then therefore you have a feeling of significance. Why? Because suddenly you're doing something that is making another person feel good. Now let's put it a different way. Do you know, for example, that if I was walking down the street, now I'm assuming here that you have a good conscience, but if I was walking down the street and I noticed that a lady in front of me dropped her bag, or maybe she's carrying a bag and the bag opens and the contents of her bag falls down and she doesn't really notice. If I run up and I pick up her stuff from the floor and I run up to her and I stop her and I say, hey, you just lost some of your personal effects. And she checks and looks at her bag and says, thank you. And she's happy. Do you know that at that point of doing that good deed, my body releases and my brain releases this chemical called serotonin automatically. The lady that I've done that good deed for, she gets a dose of serotonin. Her brain releases serotonin because it's a connection, it's a feeling of connection and significance. You've seen a good deed being done. This is what's quite interesting. If an old man was sitting in a corner shop, drinking his coffee, and was observing what was happening as we walked past, by observing what just took place, his brain releases serotonin. So you can get this by being actively involved in doing something for someone else. You can be a recipient of a good deed or an act of good kindness or service, or you could just be an observant. So there are many ways in which you can actually get a dose of serotonin. Now the final one is oxytocin. And this is very, very intrinsically linked to loneliness. Whenever you feel lonely, it means that there's a loss of connection. There's a sense of loss. And The only way you can regain that is by either stimulating your brain into, well, number one, thinking about someone you care about. And for example, imagining yourself giving them a hug, because the brain cannot tell the difference between a real and an imagined experience. You can do this by simply thinking of it in your mind, emotionally getting involved in saying, whoa, how would it feel like if I hugged my mom? You can also get this oxytocin by actually going and hugging someone. So we usually encourage people, you've got to learn how to give hugs. People you love and you care about, hug them. Because when people come together, what you find is actually the brains of each of them releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is a chemical released by the brain, especially between mothers and kids. Whenever a mother has a baby, she's overwhelmed with oxytocin. Overwhelmed with oxytocin. Whenever you see two couples together, happily, maybe married, or happily engaged, or perhaps just sharing a loving relationship, they release oxytocin. And that's the reason why you notice most people who are in a stable, happy relationship they generally feel happy about life. Why? Because they have this chemicals being released consistently and continuously. So one way to change the quality of your life is simply to be aware of the things that you can do. You could even actually do this without leaving the corners of your room or your home. Why? Because you can do all of this in your mind. And because the brain cannot tell the difference, a vividly imagined experience is almost as powerful as an acted out experience. I'm going to end with an example. This is powerful. I think it was Yale University that did an exercise where they got 3 teams, basketball teams. The first team, they said to the team, listen, we want you to sit, and every day we want you to just close your eyes, and in your imagination we want you to vividly imagine that you're doing free throws and you're doing it beautifully well and you're doing it perfectly well in your mind. Don't practice, just sit down and vividly imagine, get emotionally involved with the experience, see yourself throwing free throws, and every time you do the execute the technique, we want you to score a perfect throw. They were going to do this for a number of weeks. The second group, they said to the second group, you're going to come to court every single day and you're going to practice for a number of hours, and you're just going to practice free throws every day for a number of weeks. To the third group, they said, listen, we don't want you to train. We just want you to just relax, don't do anything. Just do whatever you would normally do, have fun. At the end of the season or the period, they tested the first group, the people who just imagined. They found that the people who just imagined, they tested them in real life and said, okay, we want you to do some free throws. Because they had conditioned their mind every day and they saw themselves doing free throws, they scored something in the region of about 23 points. Beautiful. They went to the second group, those who really practiced, the people who did it actually, and they scored about 24 points. It was almost, the difference was almost unnoticeable. The third group, there was a marginal decrease in their performance simply because they didn't perform, they didn't practice. Now here is the point. A vividly imagined experience done with a feeling of assumption, done with expectation, done as though it's real, done with conviction, is equally as good as a real experience, because the brain cannot tell the difference. The first group had conditioned their brain into believing you can do this because you've done it so many times. So when they actually tried the experience in real life, it was as if they were doing it maybe for the 20th or the 30th time. The brain couldn't tell the difference. The muscle memory was perfect, just as if they had been practicing with the second group. Here is the point. You and I, we have a great mind. We have to learn how to use our emotions. And if you can control the quality of your emotions, you can control the quality of your life. And it all begins with understanding how your emotions shape, form, influence, control, and ultimately decide the quality of your results and the quality of your life. So, if I had to choose something that I wish my father taught me, I would say that I wish my father taught me that the quality of my emotions and my emotional states ultimately will decide the quality of my life. I want to leave you with an exercise. I like you to, since if you've listened this far, I like you to take some time and start making some observations about yourself. Become a little bit more aware of your emotions. At the start, just document. Don't try to change anything, just document. Whenever you're walking down and something happens, just say, what am I feeling now? Start capturing it in writing. The next thing I want you to do is start thinking about the right response based on the outcomes you really want, and the outcomes that are intelligent, and the outcomes that will take you towards the dream that you want. And make a list of it, so that what you're doing here is actually you start studying yourself, so that when something happens you say, what should I do? In a way it might seem mechanistic, but so be it. Repetition is the mother of all skill. We're habitual beings. If you sow a thought, you reap a feeling. If you sow a feeling, you reap an action. If you sow an action, you reap a habit. Habits become conditional, and behavior in many ways decides the quality